Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. Today I want to talk about Somaliland constitutional crisis. If you live in Somaliland or follow the news there, these days there is a storm of public speeches by different sectors of the society there, and they're all talking about elections. There's elections due this year, and that's the presidential elections on the 13th of November. And also there is another election that needs to happen, which is the election of new bodies. Now, before I continue, it's good to maybe take a step back and explain what is going on and how we got to this constitution crisis. Um, I would like to mention that, first of all, I've talked about this in 2020, and I've highlighted that in this year there will be a constitution crisis. So I'll get back to um, why I've seen this problem from a long time ago. Unfortunately, now it seems we are trying to solve the problem too late. But luckily, there has been an attempt to address this ever since I've tweeted this by the government. And also there has been rulings that enable us to find a way out. But unfortunately, when you listen to the media inside Somaliland and the news, it seems many people do not understand the problem or what is the nature of the conflict and why is this really an important subject to talk about. So I'll talk about all of that. I'll walk you through the history. I've been watching and monitoring and sort of participating in Somaliland political dialogue for more than 15 years. I've living abroad as a Somalilander. I've been more close to the events there. My family, namely my dad, has been very much involved in the politics there, and I'll talk about that. So, first of all, let's clear this out. Somaliland is not Somalia. We are not talking about Somalia. We're talking about Somaliland, which is, if you look up on the internet, it's one of the most democratic countries in the Eastern Africa. The reasons why this topic is important is Somaliland has a history of democracy that goes beyond the state formation. So we would hear people talking about Somaliland being a pastoral democracy, and what that means is, in the old days and still till today, Somalilanders had the culture of sitting, under a tree, where all the elders come and discuss the matter that they have as a clan. And in that, under the tree, every man is given a chance to give his opinion, and later on, the group or whoever is the most elite will select the opinion that's been most popular. Um, so that culture today translates to giving your votes to different parties. But it's important to understand that that kind of democracy existed within the realm of a single clan or a subclan. And that's what I would like to highlight before we talk about the elections and we talk about what's going on. You need to understand or have an idea about the social structure of the Somaliland people. Somaliland has multiple clans. Generally, if you look on, like, think about it as a tree. Just started doing a very simple drawings here just to cover this topic, and there's a lot to cover. So you can group these clans into three, four, five. It depends on how you look at it. There's so many definitions of that. And I would like to highlight here that this view depends on which clan you are from. There is no really good value in explaining exactly what those clans are and spelling out the names and all of that. That's all beside the point. And if you look at Somaliland constitution, it really talks about very clearly and mentions that politics and political parties should not be based on clans. And this is one point, by the way, that a lot of researchers and outsiders who look into Somaliland history and politics uh, don't understand. So you will see a lot of Westerners mentioning clans by name, going into the details about the rhetorics or the stories that happened, and they try to use that as a way to explain politics, and that's that's wrong. That's one way against the constitution. It's fine if someone is interested in clans in particular, but when we're talking about politics, it's really doesn't really make any difference what I mean by clan A or B or C. If that makes sense. But when you look, it's a hierarchical structure. So each of these clans will be subdivided into tens of family groups. There is so many layers, by the way, in here. I'm just simplifying stuff. But when you go down and navigate down into the family tree, we're talking about, between 200 to 500 families, and these are groups of people that share an ancestry uh, around maybe the 10th or the 8th or the ninth. Who knows, it varies, but in total there are around that much, and that's actually the strongest unit that uh, many people identify themselves with, or maybe some of the family groupings that are in the tens. But what's important to understand is that this is the natural way Somalilanders have been before state formation, before Somaliland became a country, or even before the colonization that happened. And what it means is, if you just try to say, well, let people have their own parties, let them form as many as they want, you will end up with a very messy situation. And that happened. This happened in 1969, and this is when Somaliland was part of the Somali Republic. I'll not go into that history, but what's important to notice is on those parliamentary elections at that time, there were 64 bodies, and mainly they were proxies for families and family groups that I've talked about. And if you look here, for example, you can see that this is the results and how each body, how much percentage they got of the vote and how many they got into the assembly, membership in the seats in the assembly. And you can see that there were mainly, some SYL was the first, and then you have SNC second with 9.89%. And then here at the bottom, you'll see there are around 34 other bodies. We even didn't bother to list them. Imagine when you're making the vote, the bailout, how would that will look like? It's madness. And the interesting thing is here, it's if you sum up all of them, and the biggest one has less than 0.29%. But if you sum them up, that goes to 10%, almost 11%, and that actually makes it as a group the second largest group of parties. So imagine this is 11% of the votes being wasted due to this madness, where you have these so many clans that clans. Sorry, yeah, it has to be called that because it's not really a parties. So late President Mohammed Haji Ibrahim Egal of Somaliland was one of the parties that won a seat and formed the government, but he seen that problem. So when Somaliland got reclaimed its independence in 1991 and made its own constitution in 2001, it made a very bold move, which says, well, the number of political parties in Somaliland should not be more than three. Now, this is a very strange restriction in most of the democratic countries in the world, but knowing the history and knowing where we came from, it makes sense. It makes sense to have that limit, and it's lesson learned. So a lot of Somalilanders today talk about why do we have such restrictions, why we don't have independent candidates in the elections. This is all because, as we all know, still Somaliland is forming and its democracy is trying to evolve beyond clans, and having the three body helps into reducing the effect of clans. It doesn't eliminate it. It was never the intention to eliminate it, but it was a way to control it. Now you have to ask then, well, why three? Why not four? Why not five? I really don't know. I can't answer that question. But let's see how it works. So if you look at it, these three bodies is similar to a basket. And now instead of having the families grouping themselves, you can actually see the top level clans can, you know, naturally become the core of a party. So what happens is the person who starts the party, or the most famous, or the most high profile politician, naturally becomes the main figure, and around him gathers his own clan, in a natural way, sometimes not really deliberately. And what you see in some of these clans is they actually try to reach out to others. They try to get votes from other bodies, and sorry, from other clans, but that's the nature of things. So it could be that another clan comes up. Sometimes a clan, as you can see, he splits up into two, between two bodies. In some cases, you see a family of brothers and sisters both go into different body, and that's also can happen. But don't forget that this is the core base of each one of them, but it's still all the other bodies, or all the other clans are trying and sort of trying to move into one of these different clans. So sometimes you will see that this clan might move to this body, or vice versa, and we've seen that in the past years, some reconfiguration happening from time to time. um, Again, this is the hope that we have bodies that actually don't care about clan, and this is one of the most difficult challenges in Somaliland: how to survive a democratic system where people can vote however shape they want. And a lot of people obviously are, and the majority are still voting along clan affiliation and clan lines. And then you have these few parties that are trying to go and fight that, and that happened before. But unfortunately, today you can see that most no one is trying to go the no clan path. It's more coming all together as a single clan. So when such thing happen, you need sort of a reset. And even before the reset, the first question to ask is, well, here's the constitution. It has just passed. How do we form these three bodies? What kind of rules or regulations makes us pick and choose? What are the three bodies that exist? How do we renew them? How often do we renew them? Welcome to Hair 14, or law number 14. Hair number 14, hair in Somali by now means law. It's so this is a very common law in Somaliland. It's been spoke about for decades. It's now we are having the third version, and unfortunately it always creates problems. And obviously when you have a restriction like this, that is, you already three, this is where there's a law that's trying to make it fair, and to the bodies themselves, and also to the new body political associations. And we will come to these definitions that was to become a body. So I'll walk you through the stages of this law, and this will give you an idea of how we got to the constitutional crisis we have today in 2022. So first of all, the first version of this law was Hair 14 2000. And what this said is easy. Let's have political association. And this is, by the way, a term that means these are political bodies, but they are under temporary arrangement, and they will not become official political bodies until they pass at local elections. And the top three, and I will explain what top three means. Those become the actual political bodies, while the rest cease to exist. And then these three will continue and do the presidential elections and the parliament elections. So that's what Herefordine 2000 came up with. Um, and we will see when controversy comes from this. But in the first go, it made sense and it worked. And what we had is 6 months where all citizens of Somaliland who are interested to form or participate in the political um, elections, they went and they registered themselves. So there are rules around how many people should be registered from every region of Somaliland so that we don't have the problem of having many families or proxies of clans. So each political association has to have maybe 500 or 2,000 members in every region. And also there's amount of money. It changed from time to time, but there's an amount of money or fee that they have to provide. They have to tell us when they made a conference, what is the organization structure. They go through that. So what's important to note here is this elections, although it happens on a day, on a specific date, this is the local elections, things like the mayor of your city, they would then select. Actually, before even the election happens, there are political associations that get disqualified within 6 months before the actual election. This is a very important point to understand, that when we talk about Herefordine, when we talk about selecting new political bodies, the election process is 6 months in which any political association or body can be removed even from the competition even before the election. And that means really that makes it very different than the elections of the parliament or the presidential elections, because these are literally uh, these designated or certified political bodies will just come in one day to ask for the people, sorry, will go to the polling stations and do the vote. So it just literally takes a day, while here it's a whole long process. So this is, I think, something we need to keep in mind as we go through the different iterations of each of these elections. So again, in brief, Hereford in 2000 says on every local election do this sort of filtering. And then that when it came to 2007, which is these, each one of these, by the way, have 5-year term in power and in office. So when 2007 come, that was the time that the same footing should happen again. But what happened that time? The president and the political bodies all agreed to not hold the elections on that year. They decided literally to just not have elections for local elections. And here there was a political body or a political association called Qaran that started led by Dr. Gabose and Mujahid Mohammed Hashi, talking about having the need to have the elections, and not just the elections, but also similarly to now reset these three bodies according to the law. Here you see Mohammed Daud is my father. He has also been part of that movement that time, and it is really very clear from, according to them, obviously, that the have 14 at that time allowed elections on every local elections. So here it's written in Somali, and you can see here it's talking about what are the temporary license that is, or the provisional license that is given to each political association. And what you see highlighted here, it says a political association or a political body. Political association, political body, political body, political association. Again, the same thing. So what this means is that Hereford 2000 is a repeating um, law whenever there is an election of local government. It is not a one-time use. Unfortunately, at that year, the President Tahir Riala Kahin and the other political parties, all of them ignored the law basically, and they claimed that this law is actually one-time use, and it was only useful for year 20 2002 and cannot be used again. And also they stopped doing the election altogether anyway. So even they didn't compete. And this is actually was a big important movement. And thanks to Qaran, this is going to change later on with the new presidential elections, where a new president came in place, which is Mujahid Ahmed Mohamed Sirayo, which who won the elections at that time and promised to actually do something about it. Now, like he did not say let's have it on every local elections, but he said, okay, let's have this is the new version that he created. 2000 and OMC he created, but it was introduced by Somaliland is a presidential system. So the president will introduce a new law to the parliament, and the parliament has to approve that. But what happened then is this new law says arbitrary on every 10 year we will have new bodies to be competing with the actual political parties that exist instead of every 5 years, which was the case here, and which was actually on every local election. So now this 10 year could actually fall with the local election, and it might not. And this will, by the way, the reason I'm stressing this is the root cause that we will see later when we come to present time that actually caused this problem in Somaliland with the constitutional crisis we have. So note here again quickly that presidential election got delayed a bit and happened anyway. Parliament elections didn't happen in 2010. It's been postponed. So, and you can see here a theme that Somaliland has struggled um, to have full government that is um, legally in power without any extensions. And all these extensions, by the way, happen through a law. There's a law that allows that to happen, but that's not ideal. That's not right, and it's usually something that Somalilanders don't like, and also international observers also highlight this. As a country that's not recognized and looking for recognition, this means a lot to Somalilanders. So all these things have been a pattern from different administrations. So you can see here the last time we had a setting of, um, a full, government with no any extensions was 2007, and ever since there's something that was expired that was still, getting extensions and no elections. So with this new rule in 2012, uh, this law has taken effect, and the first uh, law allows now for political parties to participate. And what happened is one of the political party, which was UDUP, has been disqualified. And by the way, this was not due not having, the highest votes. They just did not finish their paperwork and all the requirements within the 6 months period. So it's important to understand that some political parties might not make it even to the elections. That's actually where most serious parties will be competing against one another. And in place of UDUB, there came a new party called Watani, and in that year, 2012, is that Somaliland really has seen Higher 14 evolving into some and working, although unfortunately it made 10 years instead of 5. Parliament elections did not happen, and elections of presidential elections got delayed by 2 years. So again, the same pattern of delays and cancellations has been going on. So after this, so here it's good to understand. Let me go back here. Why I have these crossings on the President Dahri Al Kahin and Abdurrahman Ira, who was the Speaker of Somaliland Parliament, and Faisal Al Rabi, who was the leader of one of the political parties. Right? These three have said no to even fix or amend Hair 14. they were really against it. They did not even want new bodies to open again. I'm saying this because I've met them in person. I met Abdurrahman Erro while I was working and advocating for Qaran, and he was the Speaker of the Parliament who was responsible for the laws and drafting the laws and reviewing the laws in the country. And he was really against it. And it's funny that later on, he after after a few years, he benefited actually from Qaran, uh, body that allowed the law to come in place. So this is also important point to understand that President Mohamed Sirayo did not stop because the political, the other two parties didn't agree with him. He went on and made the amendment and made that law come in, which saved Somaliland democracy, which is, again, why I'm saying that Somaliland constitution says every citizen should have the right to be elected and also to elect. So the fact that for 10 years we didn't, for 10 years we did not have the ability to open new bodies. That means we are not actually in effect allowing citizens to have the full right to be elected. And this will happen again, and so it's important to keep that in mind. Now, closer to present day, we have now the what is it? This is first, second, third, fourth iteration of elections, and what we had here is still pair 14 is there, still in use, and we are getting close to, since this was the last time, so 2022 will be the next time we will open new bodies. But before that, local elections did not happen in 2017, and the parliament did not happen again. So this is really awful at this time, because the last time we had parliament election was in 2005. So 15 years, Somaliland had the same parliament with no elections whatsoever. Um, Under the leadership of the current president, Musa Bihi, he went on and worked with the parties and the different stakeholders, and made sure that we have elections on these two parts of the government. And so in 2021, on the same day, for the first time, he held dual elections in which um, new parliament has formed and new local governments. And that was really important, because this till now, to present day, is the first time since so long ago, since 2007, that we have Somaliland government with all branches being elected with one man, one vote, or one person, one vote, and without any extensions. So that's really major, and it's important to stress. But also, there is a looming problem on the horizon. So we said that 2012 was the last time we opened new parties and local elections. Here, because it was not 2022, there was no need to open new bodies. But the problem now is, in 2022, the 10-year license that HER 14 2021 gave to the bodies has expired. And this goes along the line when I've highlighted this in 2020, saying that we're going to have a problem. There was a new law, 2020. It's called HER 14 2021. Unfortunately, it collapsed due to, it's a long story. I'm not sure who to blame, but all parties are responsible, whether it's the parliament or the president. But what that meant is, this law was trying to solve the problem that's going to happen next, and it allowed to have elections, separate elections for the bodies themselves, without being linked to the local elections. Because remember, now, since Somaliland had the 2021 elections, the next one will be in 2026. But to do the 2022 presidential elections, we need these bodies to have a legal certificates, an active certificate, to work on it. So, long story short, there was again another uprising and political activism from different politicians in Somaliland. Here are a few of them, and they have successfully actually made, instead of relying on this law that will collapse, they actually raised a complaint or a request to the High Court to explain and allow um, bodies to have their own elections to solve this crisis that we are in. That it's not fair for citizens of Somaliland not to be able to be elected for 10 years, and this is actually breaking the law if that happens. So the the High Court has made a ruling that yes, we and Somaliland can have an election, separate election, that lets citizens to register new bodies and select then the three that become the the political bodies of Somaliland. So this was a great news. This shows you that Somaliland is trying through different arms of the government to form and change and make these amendments that get us to the right path. And still there's work to be done, honestly, and still there's challenges now because although the this is a rule of the court, again, unfortunately, the political bodies, the opposition political parties, are rejecting the content and the ruling. So Faisal Al Rabi Fouad does not want bodies to open at all. Whether so, of course, we have the presidential elections this year. So here is an important date. So we have the expiry of the president be his term on 17th of December 2022, and that means there was one day there, which is sorry, this is 13 of December and 13 of November, typos there. But on that day, the 13th of November, there's one election that needs to happen, and that's what election. But the political bodies also will expire nearly around the same time, less than a month. So on the 26th of December 2022, they will expire. But according to the law here, 14 2021, sorry, 2011, they have to start the process 6 months before the expiry date. And on the 26th of June, there should be new bodies being registered and going through the process of verification and checking whether they have the right structures. They have to pay the fee. Obviously, this includes some of includes the political bodies, existing political bodies. So they have to show, for example, that they have made a conference and they have a different hierarchy or organizational chart. So that means, not unlike this election of the presidential election, which only happens on one date on November, this actually starts the election which is the filtering sort of process, starts from the 26th of June. So in one way, you can say this is the earliest election and not this. And by the way, this is a very controversial subject right now. If you try to answer this question, you will be you will be either called named or be put into different bucket of political bodies. So the opposition is saying no, we need this first, obviously for clear reasons. These are the same political bodies that were against uh, opening new bodies before, actually the same individuals that rejected that time, they are now doing it again. And they just want a monopoly on the elections. They are also saying that the president actually is using this as a chance to extend his term in office, an accusation that could be true. But overall, that's the kind of situation. Um, so, looking at this, we need to answer the question of why and what is the way forward. There are a couple of options into to really say which one is the right one. It's not just one or two. So let's go through them and let's then say which one has the least problems in Somaliland. For context, Somaliland at the moment has many issues local internally. There's a very serious drought situation in many regions of the country. There was the urban fire in Wahane, which is the biggest market in Somaliland, or the third one, biggest one in Horn of Africa, and that led to many hardship to many traders and people in Somaliland. So that means people are not really people are really having it tough, and add to that, there's a high inflation globally, and that's also affecting Somaliland. Now, the first option is to repeat 2007. And what happened in 2007 is Somaliland did not have local elections and said ignore basically having new bodies and just jump to the presidential elections. So that means today, don't open new bodies, just go and do the election of the presidential election on the 13th of December and actually stop doing registration for new bodies. This is preferred by the opposition, but it actually breaks the law. So Head 14 2011 states that the election process, or the certification process of the bodies, should start on the 26th of June this year. If that does not happen, we're basically breaking the law, and that's a precedence, setting a precedence in Somaliland to just literally ignore a law that we have. So here you have um, piece of that 2001 law saying that although you have 10 years for each of these political bodies, which they are active, before their expiry date, 6 months before that, they are the process of creating new ones starts. And we know that it doesn't mean that on the election is the only date they will be disqualified. They could be disqualified from the earlier months. So there's an election already going on, and not doing that means we are breaking the law. The other problem is that if we do the elections of the presidential elections first, there will be a big monopoly on elections, and especially presidential elections. It actually means that from 2010 until 2027, only three men or three bodies had the full power and monopoly on who runs for president. And that's like 17 years of Somaliland history is actually locked to just these three men, because we are not doing we are being ignoring opening new bodies. Um, so that's really very dangerous, and you can't call this a democracy. By comparison, the US elections in 2020 had around 100 candidates running for elections. Another problem is we will, even if this happens and then later on we open the bodies, what we will have is no elections for 4 years for those poor new bodies that get registered and get the certificate of the presidential elections. 4 years out of the 10, they will be sitting because already the presidential elections happened on that year, and we just had the parliament and the local elections in 2021. So that means they actually haven't had any value until the latest 6 years of their term, and that just doesn't make sense. So this is less serious, obviously, when compared to breaking the law, but it's actually one issue to highlight. And this is important because we are talking about there's a as I talked about that naturally clans form around the founders of the political bodies. There are, and since we have only three bodies allowed, and more clans, there are clans who are waiting for this reset to kind of have new deals and participate into the uh, political Somaliland political elections and whatnot, and not to open the election, not to give them this chance. It's actually causing problems and harming the social fabric of Somaliland. So that's the problems. If we just say let's do elections on 13th of November, these are the issues. Now, another way to do about things is say, well, let's hold both elections, each one on its own date, right? So this means that elections of the presidential elections happen on the 13th of November, and also we start on 26th of June to register new bodies. Now, there's problems with this as well. The first thing is, while the three bodies are going through a renewal process from the 26th of June, doesn't make sense for them while they're being renewed, investigated, recertified, and while that process is going on, it doesn't make any sense for them to just rock up on the 13th of November and go and have presidential elections. This is actually making no value for the process of the selecting new bodies, because that process is actually can eliminate any political body or association even before the election of the bodies. So from the 26th of June, they will start the process of vetting and filtering which bodies have the right uh, have followed the conditions. So it doesn't make sense while you're being tested to go and have a political party. That doesn't make any sense. Some people say that the bodies will turn into political associations, and that's not true, because the the law still refers to political bodies as political bodies and refers to political associations as such. So they are not turning into political association, but actually they're going through the same process of political association by being examined and looked at. So things are like, they will even look at their own internal constitution and laws and see if there are contradicting Somaliland constitution. So this is a serious process that's going on. So it doesn't make sense while that process hasn't finished to just go and have elections. Uh, Also, in one way, it's unfair to new parties, associations that are forming. So, say Oed, Kulmiya, and Watani will go on the 13th of November and do elections. They will not just go do elections, they will actually have the liberty to do campaigns and show rallies in different cities. And that's actually harming the other competition that's going on. And that means the new bodies will be out of the picture, out of the view, and that will actually increase the chances of these parties to come out and become the one that also win. Not only have the exclusive right to participate here, but also win the elections of the new body selection, and that's not fair. Another thing is that this is a tight schedule. We don't know how like from November, how will the election committee prepare for the on 26th of December, which is the latest date they can to do this election. It's kind of very very close, and again the same problems that we talked about here applies about monopoly on presidential elections for 17 years. The problem that these parties, whoever survives this unfair competition, they will sit on their hands for 4 years, and the issue of non-participation from clans. So you can see there are problems if we try to hold both elections at the same time. Sorry, this is taking long, but hopefully we're getting to the end of it. Another choice is to say let's hold the elections of the bodies earlier than the elections of the presidential elections. Now, that means that, say, on the 26th of October, we held the elections of the new bodies. And whoever wins, those three will go and participate in the presidential elections on the 13th of November. Now, technically, this on paper or in theory, this is possible. Again, it's a tight schedule between 26th of June to November. The election commission can answer to that whether they can do it or not. It will upset the opposition, obviously, because it means they have to compete with everyone again, and that's right because it's time anyway. It's not we are following the law. The law shouldn't be pleasing one party or another, but that's a side effect that we need to discuss. But it means less problems compared to what we mentioned before with the other options. In one way, it's a waste of resources. Like again, we talked about the fact that there's inflation, um, uh, there's droughts. So to ask people to show up, stop their lives, and be bothered with one election and then another within a month or two, it's not ideal. And also, it means the money the government is spending twice on these elections, and that money could have been channeled to these areas of economic stress. So another way to solve the problem is to delay the presidential elections by a small margin. And what that means is it's a little bit different to this. So what we're going to have first is the elections happening on, say, the 26th of November or the 26th of December, and then add few months to you know give some breathing room to the election commission so that there's a good gap between the two. But again, the same problems happen about you know opposition not being happy, and also government. Obviously, I think the government body will not be happy with this because, as we will see, one of the variation, they actually don't want President Bihi to do this because it means he's seriously considering running again for office. And this I'm now going into the internals of the Kulmiya body, and maybe that's a good saga to what's next. So here, what could happen is stop doing the elections for the new bodies and give 2 years extension to the president and let the president also not run again after that. That means internally his body will have new candidate and they will have also well a new leader, and that makes them happy. That's why they will not be happy with this more timely elections and little delay to make things practical. Many people within Khmer will actually love this, will love the idea to have, and maybe the president himself will, who knows, maybe he wants extension of 2 years. And this is similar to what happened in 2017 and 15 when this election got delayed by 2 years. And here actually President Sirai did not run again, and that gave actually room for President Bihi to become the presidential candidate for that party. So again, this could be a scenario that's been cooked. Who knows? But obviously, this breaks the law. Again, it breaks the law because here you have the elections not happening. This is also to please this is a way to please everybody because the many of the opposition's party, especially OID, does not want new bodies to be opened. So it's like everyone is getting extension. And this is also, that means it's bad image on Somaliland. It means that Somaliland is again doing the same old habit of canceling elections, delaying them, and doing that in a way that is not great. The final one, and I think this is my favorite. I think it's the one that suits the current climate and environment in Somaliland, is to actually have one election And this election is both for opening new bodies, and at the same time, it is the presidential elections. So on the 13th of November, we can have presidential elections, allowing all the bodies that pass the filtering process of the that starts on 26th of June, and they all participate in the presidential elections. And only the top three who had all the conditions that are required to be presented from different regions and whatnot become the three national bodies, and also the top one is the one that becomes and wins the presidential becomes the president basically uh, of the country. That means one cost, and also it means only one time to do this. Now, technically, it's possible, but it needs changes in the law again. Currently, Somaliland law only allows um, political bodies that pass the filtering process of the new selection of new bodies. Basically, those who have certificate already, they are the only one allowed to run for presidential elections. And I think that I don't see a problem to let them actually have that. So we can look at it the same way we look at local elections. And this actually saves time. So you can see there is headache with any option we talked about, but at this one has the least problems and actually saves the money and the budget of the government so that it can channel to much more needed areas. And also it means this has more flexibility in the future, that if we have timing issues again, we could use any elections basically to form new bodies. So, in summary, what I like to mention is Somaliland democracy is evolving. We started with, previously before even the independence from us, or regaining our independence from Somali Republic, we had 64 bodies altogether with Somalia, obviously. But then we understood the value of restriction. Um, it was better actually sometime that we have it on every 5 years, and that's what I would advocate for going forward. Unfortunately, we're stuck now with this 10-year limit. It was on every local elections. Then we said no, it should be on an election on its own, and I hope we continue making the changes that are useful for us. And last but not least, here's what I suggest, and what, in my humble opinion, what is the best solution for the current crisis. That single election is the one that suits the current economical challenges Somaliland has, which I talked about last. If we can't do that, then maybe a small delay to the presidential elections, 3 to 6 months only, and nothing beyond that. The third one is to actually hold the elections of the party earlier in October time, so that parties could participate in November. These are three, you know, they all have their challenges, but in this order, I think this is what's good for Somaliland. Thank you very much for listening. That was my view, and also a lot of history about Somaliland laws and elections. And hopefully we get through this, and I know Somaliland will. Thank you. Salam alaikum.